In return for his good deed, Lyle Bland, who couldn't care less, is made a Mason. He finds good fellowship, all kinds of comfort designed to remind him of his virility, and even a number of useful business contacts. Beyond this, all is just as tight as that business advisory council. Non-Masons stay pretty much in the dark about what goes on, though now and then something jumps out, exposes itself, jumps giggling back again, leaving you with few details but a lot of awful suspicions. Some of the American founding fathers were Masons, for instance. There's a theory going around that the USA was and still is a gigantic Masonic plot under the ultimate control of a group known as the Illuminati. It is difficult to look for long at the strange single eye crowning the pyramid which is found on every dollar bill and not begin to believe the story a little. Too many anarchists in the 19th century Europe, Bakunin, Proudhon, Salverio Friscia, were Masons, for it to all be pure chance. Lovers of global conspiracy, not all of them Catholic, can count on the Masons for a few good shivers and voids when all else fails. One of the best of the classic weird Mason stories was Dr. Livingstone. Livingstone? Oh, yes. Come wandering into a native village in not even the heart, but the subconscious of darkest Africa. A place, a tribe he's never seen before, fires up in the silence unfathomable stares. Livingstone ambles up to the village chief and flashes him a Masonic high sign. The chief recognizes it, returns it, all smiles, and orders every fraternal hospitality laid on for the white stranger. But recall that Dr. Livingstone, like Werner von Braun, was born close to the spring equinox, and so had to confront the world from that most singular of the zodiac's singular points. Well, and keep in mind where those Masonic mysteries come from in the first place. Check out Ishmael Reed. He knows more about it than you'll ever find here. We must also never forget famous Missouri Mason, Harry Truman, sitting by virtue of death in office this every night, August 1945, with his control finger poised right on Miss Enola Gay's atomic clit, making ready to tickle 100,000 little yellow folks into what will come down as fine vapor deposit of fat cracklings wrinkled into the fused rubble of their city on the inland sea. By the time Bland joined up, the Masons had long degenerated into just another businessman's club. A real shame. Business of all kinds, over the centuries, had atrophied certain sense receptors and areas of the human brain, so that for most of the fellows taking part, the present-day rituals were no more, and even maybe a little less, than hollow mummery. Not for all of them, though. Now and then you found a throwback. Lyle Bland happened to be one. The magic in these Masonic rituals is very old, and way back in those days, it worked. As time went on and it started being used for spectacle to consolidate what were only secular appearances of power, it began to lose its zip. But the words, moves, and machinery have been more or less faithfully carried down over the millennia through the grim rationalizing of the world. And so the magic is still there, though latent, needing only to touch the right sensitive head to reassert itself. Bland found himself coming home to Beacon Hill after meetings late at night, unable to sleep. He would lie down in his study on the Davenport, not thinking about anything in particular, and come back with a jolt, his heart pounding terribly, knowing he'd just been somewhere, but unable to account for the passage of time. The old American Empire clock beat in the resonant hallway. The girandole mirror, passed on by generations of Blands, gathered images in its quicksilver pool. that Lyle couldn't bring himself to face. In another room, his wife, varicose and religious, groaned in her sleep. What was happening to him? Next meeting night, home on his back on the accustomed Davenport, Wall Street Journal with nothing in it he didn't already know. Lyle Bland rose up out of his body, about a foot, face up, and realized where he was, and whoosh, back in again. He lay there, more terrified than he'd ever been, even at Belleau Wood. Not so much because he'd left his body, but because he knew that this was only the first step. The next step would be to roll over in midair and look back. Old magic had found him. He was going off on a journey. He knew he couldn't keep from going on with it. It took him a month or two before he could make the turn. When it happened, he felt it as a turn not so much in space as in his own history. Irreversible. The Bland who came back to rejoin the inert white container he'd seen belly up on the sofa thousands of years beneath him had changed forever. Before very long, he was spending most of his time on that Davenport, and hardly any at all down on State Street. His wife, who never questioned anything, moved vaguely through the rooms, discussing only household affairs, sometimes getting an answer if Bland happened to be inside his body, but most often not. Odd-looking people began to show up at the door, without phoning. Creeps, foreigners with tinted, oily skin, wens, styes, cysts, wheezes, bad teeth, limps, staring, or, worse, with strange, faraway smiles. She let them in the house, all of them, and the study doors were closed gently behind them. In her face, she could hear nothing but gently behind them, in her face. She could hear nothing but a murmur of voices in what she guessed to be some foreign tongue. They were instructing her husband in the techniques of voyage. There have happened, though rarely in geological space, journeys taken northward on very blue, fire blue seas, chilled, crowded by floes, to the final walls of ice. Our judgment lapsed fatally. We paid more attention to the Perrys and Nansens who returned, and worse, named what they did success, though they failed, because they came back to the fame, to praise, they failed. We only wept for Sir John Franklin and Salomon André, mourned for their cairns and bones, and missed among the poor, frozen rubbish the announcements of their victory. By the time we had the technology to make such voyages easy, we had long worded over all ability to know victory or defeat. What did André find in the polar silence? What should he have heard? What should we have heard? Bland, still an apprentice, hadn't yet shaken off his fondness for hallucinating. He knows where he is when he's there, but when he comes back, he imagines that he has been journeying underneath history. That history is Earth's mind, and that there are layers set very deep, layers of history analogous to layers of coal and oil in Earth's body. The foreigners sit in his parlor, hissing over him, leaving offensive films of sebum on everything they touch, trying to see him through this phase, clearly impatient with what they feel are the tastes of a loafer and vulgarian. He comes back raving about the presences he has found out there, members of an astral IG, whose mission, as indeed Ravanu implied through the medium of Peter Saksa, is past secular good and evil. Distinctions like that are meaningless out there. Yes, all staring at him. But then why keep saying mind and body? Why make that distinction? Because it's had to get over the wonder of finding that Earth is really a living critter. After all those years of thinking about a big dumb rock to find a body and psyche, he feels like a child again. He knows that in theory, he must not attach himself, but still, he's in love with his sense of true wonder, with having found it again, even this late, even knowing that he must soon let it go. To find that gravity, taken so for granted. To find that gravity, taken so for granted, is really something eerie, messianic, extrasensory in Earth's mind-body, having hugged to its body's center the wastes of dead species, gathered, packed, transmuted, realigned, and rewoven molecules to be taken up again by the coal tar Kabbalists of the other side. The ones Bland on his voyages has noted, taken, boiled off, teased apart, explicated to every last permutation of useful magic, centuries past exhaustion, still finding new molecular pieces, combining and recombining them into new synthetics. Forget them. Forget them. They are no better than the Clipot, the shells of the dead. You must not waste your time with them. The rest of us, not chosen for enlightenment, left on the outside of Earth at the mercy of a gravity we have only begun to learn how to detect and measure, must go on blundering inside our front brain, faith, and cute correspondences, hoping that for each psi synthetic taken from the Earth's soul, there is a molecule, secular, more or less, ordinary and named, over here, kicking endlessly among the plastic trivia, finding in each deeper significance and trying to string them all together like terms of a power series, hoping to zero in on the tremendous and secret function, whose name, like the permuted names of God, cannot be spoken. Plastic saxophone, reed, sounds of unnatural timber, shampoo bottle, ego image, Cracker Jack prize, one-shot amusement, home appliance casing, faring for winds of cognition, baby bottles, tranquilization, meat packages, disguise of slaughter, dry cleaning bags, infant strangulation, garden hoses feeding endlessly the desert. But to bring them together, and their slick persistence and our preterition to make sense out of, to find the meanest sharp sliver of truth in so much replication, so much waste. Lucky Bland to be free of it. One night he called his whole family together in the Davenport, around the Davenport in the study. Lyle Jr. came in from Houston, shivering with first stage gripe from his contact with a world where air conditioning is not so essential to life. Clara drove down from Bennington, and Buddy rode the MTA in from Cambridge. As you know, Bland announced, I have been taking these little trips lately. He was wearing a simple white smock and holding a red rose. He looked unearthly. All were later to agree. His skin and eyes had a clarity which is seldom encountered except on certain spring days at certain latitudes just before sunrise. I have found, he continued, that each time out, I have been traveling farther and farther. Tonight, I am going out for good. That is, I'm not coming back. So I wanted to say goodbye to you all and let you know that you'll be provided for. He'd been to see his friend Coolidge hot short of the State Street law firm at Solidieri Poor, Nash, De Brutus, and Short, and made sure all of the family finances were in perfect order. I want you to know that I love you. I want you to know that I love you all. I'd stay here if I could, but I have to go. I hope you can understand. One by one, his family came up to say goodbye. Hugs, kisses, handshakes done. Bland sank back into that Davenport's last embrace, closed his eyes with a dim smile. After a bit, he felt himself beginning to rise. Those watching disagreed about the exact moment. Around 9:30, Buddy left to see The Bride of Frankenstein, and Miss Bland covered the serene face with a dusty chintz drape she'd received from a cousin who never understood her taste.